Cori Bush's political career may be dead, but the people she was representing in Congress are alive and well. And no, I don't mean the voters in her congressional district. I mean the terrorists surrounding Israel who want to see the state wiped off the map with everybody who lives there being killed. They're still there. They're still active, and they're still planning, according to what we're being told, the response, as it's being called, to the killing of Ismail Haniyeh, which Israel hasn't officially taken responsibility for. Iran has arrested a bunch of senior Iranian officials, which who again they might be working for Israel, they might be working for themselves. Many in Iran don't like the regime. I'm sure many even within the regime don't like the regime. But Iran has many ways in which it can attack Israel, as it has shown through since the revolution, basically in 1979, but more so in recent decades. We saw it on October 7th. Iran can attack Israel while preserving some sort of plausible deniability, which is not plausible to anybody who's following what's going on. But also gives Israel that plausible deniability of, look, this was, this was from Hamas, so we're going to respond against Hamas. Or this was from Lebanon, so we're going to respond in Lebanon and pretend like we don't know where this is all coming from. But we know where it's all coming from. And we also know that there is a possibility of this Iranian so-called response when it comes, that it might come from Lebanon so that Iran is able to not have their own people in Iran harmed and use essentially the people of Lebanon as human shields, as they have been doing and ha as they've been doing in Gaza and in the West Bank as well. Welcome to the reality show. I'm joined by Michael and Nathan, and we are in a basically some sort of unofficial series here within the show or within the channel. The series of waiting for Iran, waiting for the Iranian response. And yeah, well, it's one thing when we do this on the channel. It's a different thing when Israel does this as a matter of policy. We'll get to talk about that as well. Michael, your thoughts on what's going on right now on the use of Lebanon as human shield?
Well, it's not like you said, Razi, it's not just Lebanon, it's all of the Iranian terror axis. The Houthis, the Hamas in Gaza, and Hezbollah, and there's the Muslim Brotherhood and a whole bunch of other Islamic Jihad, which are supported by Qatar and other people. This is just standard. And one of the amazing things that I think about is when the American geniuses here that write our policy say, well, it's well known that Iran is the largest sponsor of state terrorism in the world. And then they go on and just talk about everything else like it's a perfectly fine day. And then let's just keep going. It's a little like telling a patient you have cancer, but your blood pressure's high. So we're gonna treat you as a holistic person and worry about all of them kind of equally a little bit. Or maybe we don't really like to talk about cancer because it's scary, and we'll keep going on. You all know I use cancer as an analogy. If you've heard the show before a lot, Iran is clearly a cancer in the entire world, and there's no for the regime in Iran. There's no positive thing that the regime in Iran gives anybody anywhere. It doesn't give its people anything good, and it certainly doesn't give the world anything good. And it is only because of the weak American doctrine against Iran that allows it to perpetuate. And I say American because unfortunately, Western Europe just seems unable to take a major stand against pretty much anything these days, and just decries any sort of military action, no matter who's doing it or why it occurs. And instead, they want to sit back and, as I like to say, sip cappuccino and criticize everybody. And that's great for Iran. I don't think this is anything different than usual. Hezbollah started a war on October 8th, right after Joe Biden told them not to. And of course, nobody's afraid of Joe Biden. Nobody's afraid of the U.S. Certainly, nobody on the Iranian axis is afraid of the U.S. The U. There's a new story I'll just finish with brewing that Iran hasn't attacked yet because of U.S. diplomacy. It is a horrific, scary thing to think what has U.S. agreed to, if that is true, in terms of holding back Iran so that they send a proportional response to Israel annihilating a terrorist who helped orchestrate the October 7th massacre. That's what we're talking about here. And that is the Obama / Biden doctrine, because I don't think it's actually changed. And it is really, really troubling. And the reason it's troubling is because we all know it's not going to end with this.
Yeah. Um, Thanks, Paul, for saying welcome back, Razi. Yeah, sometimes I ask Daniel for a day off, and on rare occasions, I am granted that day off. And yesterday, I log in for a few minutes, and I see that some people are very happy with my absence, but too bad. Speaking of absence, Nathan is back after a long absence, and of course, we bring you right back into this lovely topic of waiting around for the Iranian so-called response. Nathan, what do you make of this?
Yes, and I'm waiting right in the midst of it. So it could happen any moment now, even live on the air right now. And you'll see me. I'm actually in the safe room right now, so I won't have to go anywhere else. But I have to bring the family in here if it starts. So, I mean, I'm not surprised about Hezbollah deploying their strategic weapons, in the midst of population areas. Human shields is their strategy. We've known this for years. We've known that, or at least we've said this on ARCUK, that they are exploiting the West's altruism and the fact that the West will not target these areas because they're surrounded by civilians. They exploit that exactly to do that, to deploy their weapons and bases and everything within a civilian population. So this should not surprise us. And I know I missed your first part of your monologue, Razi, but I'm actually, I think there's a positive, I think, to the fact that this report was released by the Alma Institute, I think they're called, or Alma Center, that reported this story. I think, I mean, I don't have any information, but I speculate that Israel allowed this release prior to Israel bombing these places. So I think this is a part of kind of preparing the international opinion to say, hey, we know you're planting these your strategic missiles in these heavily populated areas, and that's not going to deter us from bombing these places because we have to protect our citizens. So I'm actually surprised for the better by this report. So I wonder what you think.
Yeah, so I didn't actually mention the report yet, but yeah, it's basically what you just said. There was a report that they are hiding, in humanitarian zones and so on, in Beirut, in South Lebanon, near whatever UN facilities are there. And yeah, this is of course how they do things. It worked to some extent in Gaza. I mean, yeah, Israel bombs occasionally places that you're supposedly not supposed to bomb, but sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it does these things like I keep mentioning that press conference where they were showing the press conference in English where the IDF spokesperson was showing proof that Shifa Hospital was used as a command center for Hamas, something we've known for a long time. And I'm thinking, if you know that, why is the action you take against it a press conference in English rather than military action? So yeah, I'm never too happy about that. I like to see them actually follow through. And then like first bomb it and then tell us why you bombed it if you have to. Um, Michael, to a point you made, I want to go back to something, to an article in the Wall Street Journal from a few days ago that I've already read this on the Daily Objective, but this was about the coming escalation, and the article, somewhere in the middle of the article, is the following paragraph. The U.S. asked European and other partner governments to convey a message to Iran not to escalate, warning that any significant strike would draw a response and signaling that efforts by Iran's new president, Masoud Pezeshkian, to improve engagement with the West would have a better chance if Iran shows restraint. According to people involved in the discussions, the U.S. said as a part of its message that it was also pressing Israel to de-escalate. Now, everything about this paragraph was absolutely infuriating to me because, first of all, the U.S., is begging Iran not to be the savages that they've shown us for over 40 years that they are, begging them not to act on what they're telling us is their only goal, which is death to Israel, death to America, saying signaling that efforts by Iran's new president to improve engagement with the West would have a better chance if Iran shows restraint. So don't do anything and we'll pay you. And then basically says, yeah, but we're also going after Israel. It's also pressing Israel to de-escalate. So that's U.S. policy in a nutshell when it comes to Iran. Michael.
Yeah, the U.S. policy since the beginning of the war has been that we need to worry about Islamophobia as much as anti-Semitism. We need to treat, I've quoted before Blinken having the great realization recently that Hamas wasn't negotiating in good faith. Translate, a terrorist is not negotiating in good faith. I mean, how do you even put negotiation with a terrorist in there? It used to be that we didn't negotiate with terrorists, but now we actually negotiate with terrorist regimes. The other thing that I would say is that the U.S. is not telling Iran, do not respond at all, or we are going to do something offensively, because Biden doesn't understand that we have offensive weapons as well as defensive one. They're saying them, don't escalate it. Don't be disproportionate in your response. And that's a despicable discussion. I mean, nothing that Iran does is targeted as opposed to what Israel does, but it still doesn't justify it. The last point I would make is, I mean, U.S. policy here is completely broken. It is based on the need for short-term, mediocre death by 1,000 cuts, as opposed to long-term, philosophically based policy, which is to say that any regime run by Ayatollah Khomeini, regardless of who the president is an Islamic militant regime that wants to declare Sharia law as globally as possible. End of story. Until that regime is replaced, that is their goal. If the U.S. ends up in another deal with Iran to help fund that goal, it'll be another massive failure on our part, just as it was under Obama. But this doesn't surprise me. The U.S. response is absurd, and it really pretends that people in these Islamic militant regimes are sort of just like we are in the West, and they just really want a good life for their people, and Israel is just getting in the way of that.
Yeah. Thank you, Apollo Zeus, for gifting an Ayn Rand Center UK membership. Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. Thank you to the people letting us know that they won't accept any gifted memberships. You know, it's an opt-in thing. So you can opt in or you can opt out. But yeah, thanks for letting us know that you wouldn't accept it because you think you can't criticize us if you do, which is also an interesting theory. But Nathan, yeah, it's been as I mentioned, it's been a while since you've been on, and I don't remember if we've talked about what's going on in the north of Israel in the episodes that you've been on previously. But even if we have, things are worse just by the fact that it's still going on. It's worse because every day that passes is a day that people can't go back to home. can't go back home, can't go back to their business, can't go back to their normal lives because Israel refuses to act against the people shooting at it. Yeah. So what are your thoughts?
So, I mean, I would be glad to give a kind of a brief analysis, or a little bit more than a brief analysis of what I think is going on, because I'm actually a little more optimistic right now. I think the tone in Israel has completely changed in the last several days. I mean, yes, surely we are waiting, and you can argue whether that is a good policy or not, but nobody is even questioning the fact that Israel is about to engage in a very, very serious war in the north, and Iran also. So there's no, there's no conversations like we're ready, we're prepared, we're going to protect our citizens. It's like we are going to exact a very heavy price from the Iranians and the Lebanese. So, so the way I see basically everything that happened since October 7 is that Israel suffered a huge, huge strategic blow. Its deterrence levels have basically vanished after the Hamas attack in the south. And I think Israel was perceived to be really, really just weak and scared, and no initiative. So all of its efforts and focus was on the south and in Gaza, and even there, the war just kept kind of going on and on and on with no decisive actions down there. However, and then if you look at the north, so you have the Hezbollah that just is bombing Israel incessantly, and sorry guys, אני באמצע משהו חמודים שלי. Sorry, I have the kids here, they're not going to sleep. Sorry about that. So you have the Hezbollah in the north that's just bombing Israel, and Israel, is playing this tit for tat game for months. And I think that what happened in April, when Iran attacked Israel it was an unprecedented attack in historical levels. Hundreds of missiles, rockets, and what are they called, and drones into Israel, and Israel basically did nothing. So I mean, the reported attack on a what was it, like a radar or something like that in Iran? I mean, that was pathetic. And I think everybody in the region was like, Israel is pathetic, it's weak, it's about to fall, it doesn't have the guts to do anything anymore. So Israel's strategic situation was really just the worst of the worst. But then I think that something happened after the drone attack in Tel Aviv. So Israel launched a very significant attack in Yemen, and basically, blew up their oil refineries. They targeted I think it was an airport and a seaport, and then some other ammunition bases and locations. So, and I might be wrong on this, and I'm not a history expert, but I think that was the first time in Israel's history that it attacked economic assets of the enemy. I don't know if they did that any other time in history. I think it was always targeted. They always targeted military assets, never economic ones. So I think something changed there. And then you had the two assassinations, one after the other. And I think at that point, both the Israelis and its enemies thought, well, okay, Israel were tough against the Yemenites, but they're just the Yemenites. They're not tough against Hezbollah and Iran, because they can still inflict really heavy damages against Israel. So, and Israel basically kept silence. Like, they didn't say anything. So they did the assassinations. They took only responsibility for the one in Lebanon against the Hezbollah top commander, but they didn't say anything about the assassination of Haniyeh, the Hamas top political leader. So I think that Iran was thinking, okay, we're just going to attack them again, and nothing will happen to us. But then suddenly the tone in Israel started to change, and the reporters, I guess you could say the kind of left-leaning or center-leaning reporters, started to go on the press and in a way, how will I put it? They express like, what is Netanyahu doing? You know, he's taking these big risks and he's going to engage in total war right now, and like this is too risky. So the conversation wasn't like, Israel should negotiate or something. The conversation was, what is Netanyahu doing? Why is he getting us to war? So I think the Iranians started to understand, wait, this is a trap. Like Israel has maybe wants this to happen, and they want maybe to attack us. Who knows? Like all gloves are off. And then you started getting reports over like what kind of economic assets Iran has and where Israel can attack. So there's the Khuzestan region in West-South Iran, which is basically most of their oil refinery and oil exports. They go out from there. So if Israel attacks that, which has no significant defense mechanism, at least from what I hear and what the reports say, Iran could really suffer economically. Iran also has apparently its water system is really bad. If Israel attacks one of its
Dam.
a dam, yeah. So if Israel, I think there are like two significant big dams in Iran. If Israel bombs those, then basically they won't have running water. And so you started to get all these reports like of what Israel can do. And this was like the Israeli media never ever had these reports before. So there's started to be a sense in I think all over the place that okay, Israel is actually ready for this time, and they're going to attack. And now the conversation in Israel is more or less, should we preemptively strike or should we wait and then strike? So I think this is a really optimistic development. And I mean, it is nerve-wracking, because total war means that it's going to be really nasty and brutal for Israel as well. But from a rational, long-term perspective, that this is what Israel has to do. It has no choice. It has to do that if it wants to survive. And this is really the best time, because I mean, if they just wait, if they prolong this, it's just going to be harder in the future. And now we can do it before allegedly Iran has nuclear weapons. So now is the time to regain some of that strategic, superiority, and use Israel's technology to really just decimate them.
Nathan, Razi, can I just reply? Because I think,
Sure.
and I'm not living there right now, but we live in Ramat Aviv in Israel most of the time. We're here back in the States for the summer because it's cooler. But we will be back, and my oldest son is in the IDF reserves, and he was on the Lebanon border and on the Syrian border for a while. He's out now, going back soon. I think a couple of things are really important. One of the reasons that Israel did not respond to this massive 350 plus aerial weapons attack against Israel was because the U.S. constrained them. And you had Joe Biden going on public TV saying that take the win. Only 1%, which is the wrong math, because three different missiles got more than 3 missiles, about 9 missiles got through, or whatever got through, and that's 3%. But anyway, it was unbelievable that he could go on public TV and say that basically playing defense is now considered a win. And then Israel was constrained in its response. I do truly believe that we have a huge problem with Netanyahu, because I don't think Netanyahu knows how to fight this war. And he's getting kicked from one side by Biden, who's basically telling him to not do anything. And he's getting punched by his ridiculous right-wing crazy people in the government, telling him to flatten Gaza and go flatten the north. And he's, as usual, stuck. And we all know from Netanyahu's recent behavior since this new government came in that he has no philosophical underpinning other than self-preservation. I agree with you that, so I think that's the reason there was no response at that time. I think when a missile came into Tel Aviv, ironically from the Houthis, and I guess thankfully it came from the Houthis because you're probably right, they'd be too, quote, afraid to do anything with Hezbollah, at least before there was actually a response. Now, mind you, the Houthis have continued to fire on ships and so on. So it was very good. It helped a lot. And it was the only real thing that was done against the Houthis since they started their baloney a long time ago, despite the fact that the US and the UK and everybody has warships in the area. And these warships are supposed to protect. But notice that the US and UK response to the Houthis has been purely defensive. And all we hear about on the news is how a few Houthi drones were taken out. Unmanned aerial vehicles were taken out. Really? That's supposed to deter people? Especially when they're paying nothing because they're getting these drones from Iran? Now, hopefully, there is a turning point here. What they did show is that they can actually emasculate a group with there were a lot of airplanes that were used, including American-made airplanes. But until Netanyahu okays a real attack, and it has to be on the north, this is going to continue. This ridiculous, the fact that a wonderful country like Israel that is contributing to the entire world is sitting here waiting around for a terrorist Islamic militant regime in Iran to attack them is nuts. It's nuts. And this has become the Biden doctrine. And it should be, it's because Netanyahu doesn't have the balls to go up against Biden. And he also doesn't have any philosophical underpinning to drive a real strategy here.
Well, look, Michael, I agree with you that if there is one person who loves to disappoint, that would be Netanyahu. I mean, he just disappoints you time after time. And I don't want to make the mistake of, fool me one time, fool me twice. But, this is my biggest concern, that Netanyahu will get cold feet in the last minute and then he'll somehow restrain Israel's response. But I think that mostly Israel was shocked after Iran's attack in April. I think they did not anticipate so many missiles. They did not anticipate that kind of response. And I think the top intelligence general, he quit after what happened. So I think there was just general shock in Israel. But with everything that we love to, criticize politicians, they're not that stupid. I mean, they are stupid, but they're not that stupid. So I think they realized that Iran's attack was not just, a response against, they weren't just trying to get at Israel. They understood that this was some sort of strategic experiment for the day when they have, nuclear missiles with nuclear warheads. So then they can try to infiltrate Israel's defense system. And I think some of the Israeli politicians talked about that. They said that one day that could be a missile with a nuclear warhead. So they understood the significance, I think, of the attack, and I hope that they've strategized this war somehow to say, okay, we're going to prepare for this offensive, and we're going to invite them to attack us, and then we're going to go after them and take out the regime and do what needs to be done. Again, Netanyahu is the he's the concerning element here, because, like you said, he will probably get cold feet. I think he likes the excuse of Biden, so I wouldn't put it as Biden deters him. I think Netanyahu likes to be deterred by Biden and Israeli generals, and he likes to just excuse his inaction more than anything.
So first of all, I do have to say, I think capitalist or socialist, atheist or religious, one of the things that everybody seems to agree with is that one of the greatest moments in the history of television was that that time that guy on the BBC was working from home and interviewed, and the kids came in one after the other, and then the wife comes in and takes away the kids. So I'm glad we had a moment like that, although it was only audio, but still, yeah, that's especially when we talk about the things we talk about. It's
See, this is why I don't come more often.
well, we can have moments like that more often, but yeah. Now to the less optimistic part. So I have to say this first of all. I think, and I've said this on the show in recent, certainly in the past week. I think Israel seems to have grown somewhat of a set in the past couple of months on some things. First of all, there was that really impressive rescue operation of the hostages, which in which they didn't seem to care who dies as long as it's not, on our side, which is how you should approach war. Then there was killing. There was the operation against the Houthis. There was killing Def, killing Shukr, and then killing Hania. So all that is very impressive. That doesn't take away the fact that still, there's a chunk of the country in the north where you can't live, and people who are living there are risking their life and are getting injured, and in some cases getting killed. So I wonder, actually, I wonder to what extent Israel growing a set is the result of Gantz leaving the government and Netanyahu kind of having only those right-wing nuts, as you describe them, Michael. Although I think the one thing that I would want him to listen to them on is war. Like everything else.
I completely agree that the problem is that they don't differentiate between what is defensible with any sort of rationality and some sort of mysticism of religiosity and God-given right to do whatever you want. I mean, they're really we all know that.
Yeah, yeah. And in terms of what Israel might do, by the way, Nathan, I don't see Israel bombing any dams. That's I think look, the fact that there's a conversation going on in Israel that sounds better than the conversations up until now, uh, you know, I don't know to what extent we can count on that. Again, I'm hoping that you're right and I'm wrong. I would like to see Israel do things that maybe encourage an uprising in Iran, which we know, unlike Gaza, we have allies in Iran. Like there are people who want to get rid of their regime more than the rest of us want to get of that rid of that regime. But yeah, I again, it seems to me like Israel is waiting with whatever serious action it might take against Iran for a disaster to happen in Israel so that it can justify it, have international legitimacy or whatever crap they usually wait for.
Yeah, no, I agree. They won't bomb the dams before something severe happens in Israel. But the fact that they're saying, look, this is on the table is already a very different tune. And I wouldn't take off, like, I wouldn't, I think it could be that they will bomb. I mean, don't like take what I'm saying here now and let, we'll see in a few days that it's not true. But I think the oil fields are not off the table. I think that is serious. And I think Israel could strike those, but I really don't know. The thing is, I think Israel will. Okay, well, I don't want to make just predictions, but I hope that they're going to use this case to take out the nuclear facilities. I hope that they'll use it to do even inflict more damage than that. And I think the oil fields are a very good target for Israel. It should be relatively easy to carry out. And in Lebanon, I don't know what Israel is planning there, but definitely they will strike those areas where large precise missiles are located, even if they're in the midst of populations. I think that will happen.
Again, I think you're optimistic. I hope you're right. But the thing is, with Iran itself, and I've said this before on the show, it's with all the the limitations that Israel puts on itself and then blames America for putting on it. They don't exist with Iran. Now, Iran is much more difficult to go after militarily because they're a serious military power, but they have military bases. They're not hiding, their stockpiles of weapons under the population in Beirut or in Gaza. So in that sense, when Israel is talking about international legitimacy and all that stuff that I really, of course, like to see Israel not think about when it's thinking about how to protect its citizens, but even within those parameters, you can still take action in Iran that would significantly harm that regime's ability to strike at Israel. And again, yeah, what I'd love to see is Israel actually doing that before the Iranian attack, that whenever that's coming, if it's coming, and that's the moment when I might be as optimistic as you are, Nathan, and but we'll have to wait and see.
Well, I'll tell you what will disappoint me is if Iran will suddenly become deterred, and then they'll just do a kind of a small attack for show off that won't be serious, and then Israel will not have the legitimacy, quote unquote, to really attack Iran, and then the whole thing will just go without, it will peter out without any significant operation or war. So that's also a possibility, I think.
Yeah, although I think again within whatever parameters diplomacy or international relations place on countries, saying we are coming to attack you has to be a legitimate thing to respond to militarily. But yeah, who knows, Michael?
Well, having a constitution that says from the river to the sea, and we're going to kill all the Jews would normally, under most circumstances, also be a legitimate reason to attack somebody, or at least do some serious attack them. Just let's leave it at that. Of course, that's not allowed. Having people run up and down streets shouting "Death to America," that's okay, because I guess that's protected under the First Amendment in the U.S., and so therefore that applies to a bunch of Islamic militants anywhere, including in the U.S., but especially in other places where they actually mean it, "Death to America." And let's not forget that we have 8 American hostages in the U.S. In Gaza that the U.S. regime has not done anything about. And the reason I keep harping on this is I agree that Netanyahu is, of course, a consummate politician and has no principles except for self-preservation. I get that. But if the West had a different point of view and a public point of view that actually was shocked and did what Razi just said, which is to have appropriate responses to these essentially attempting murder or planning to attempt a murder, then we would be in a very different situation. And it's not clear to me that Iran would be forecasting all of this stuff, never mind doing it. But what we have is really a bunch of kind of just shows going on. I mean, it makes for great footage on the news, I suppose, to have 4 aircraft carrier groups in the Mediterranean area, so-called protecting Israel. But there's no discussion that those groups would actually fire a missile, except in defense. And this is with 4 American hostages. It used to be that countries protect their people. Now, Jimmy Carter didn't protect American hostages when they were Iran. He finally got enough political pressure to send in some helicopters, which of course broke along the way, and then apologized for all of it, mostly because he shouldn't have, started anything. Why would I start anything with the Iranian regime? They have a lot of people in their military, which is not a metric that matters. And then Ronald Reagan came in and had whatever conversation he had through whatever people he had it, and then suddenly the American hostages were returned. So all my point is that the situation in the world today vis-a-vis Iran basically causing all this chaos, causing many poor countries to pay a lot more for shipping, doesn't affect America that much, which is why Americans don't care. And it just keeps going on, and Iran is allowed to run rampant. And this is because the leader of the free world surrounded by the other Western democracies, is completely impotent and refuses to acknowledge what is really going on and is holding Israel one hand back. I hope you're right, Natan, that Israel actually has a response, as they did with the Houthis.
So I want to look back at Lebanon again and ask, to what extent, Nathan, Israel used to have, it went to war in Lebanon in 82. It stayed there until 2000. There was Israeli presence there on the ground in South Lebanon. There was the South Lebanese army, which were Lebanese people fighting alongside Israel. Israel left in not in the way you want to leave, knowing what you're leaving behind. Uh, Also mishandled things with the South Lebanese army, which makes you wonder how eager others would be to support Israel if they are inside a country that is Israel's enemy. But to what extent does Israel, do you think, does Israel have any support among Lebanese people? Do you think that's much of a thing?
That's a good question. I wouldn't be able to tell you. I do know that in the past, even the Shiites were friendly with Israel. So it's really, if you think about it from a, you know, individual and liberty perspective, it's tragic what went on because Israel made a mistake after a mistake after a mistake. It did not recognize the potential danger coming from the Islamic Republic Revolution. It did not understand that it would radicalize the Shiites in Lebanon. It did not realize that Hezbollah is going to be is going to be bad news for Israel. It didn't realize that Hamas is going to be bad news for Israel. And they had, decades upon decades to learn who the Muslim Brotherhood is and why they are dangerous and why mysticism is bad. But, they were thinking, oh, they're just religious, and Islam and Christianity, they're all good. They're all fine. So, we don't have to look into their ideas too carefully to understand the danger that they pose to us. So, Lebanon could have been very friendly to Israel if Israel just had an actual foreign policy, if it had a strategy in the area. And by the way, there are many opportunities for Israel in terms of minority groups. I mean, Israel could strike alliances with the Kurds all over the Middle East. The Kurds in northern Iraq basically have an autonomy. And we don't know this for sure, but I think Israel does aid them, and it has for sure aided them militarily in the past. I think to some extent even fought, but I don't know, that's a whole other historical story. But you have the Druze located in southern Syria, and they kind of have their own autonomy, but they're surrounded by radical Sunnis and they're surrounded by Hezbollah. So, Israel could exploit that. Israel could extend a hand, say, hey, let's fight together. But I don't see Israel doing that. It's not thinking strategically. It's just thinking how it can survive, in the short term, and just not. That's what happens when when you don't have a moral backbone, when you don't really believe in the just cause of your own nation and of who you are.
Yeah. Thank you, Bullmoose, for the super chat. Bullmoose says, what about international assets like embassies? Yeah, they're definitely exposed in a sense. There's a limit to how much you can increase security there. And of course there's the Olympic Games, which are going to be over in 4 days, but that's 4 days for the terrorists to do what they've been promising to do. Israelis have been getting threats from before the Olympics and during the Olympics, and yeah, it's probably not easy to protect different athletes and or different places at the same time. And the fans, there are many Israeli fans in the Olympics. So yeah, we don't know, and we're sitting around and waiting. That is the bottom line here. I mean, at some point, something needs to be there has to be a line somewhere, and maybe it has been drawn by the Israeli government, and we don't know what it is. The line at which they will say we will no longer let Iran basically have this constant threat above our heads, but my assumption is that line is probably many, many deaths on Israeli soil directly from an Iranian attack, because we've had many deaths on Israeli soil from Iranians or Iranian backed terrorists. And yeah, I guess again we'll unfortunately I think find out. Michael.
Well, I just want to say, gentlemen, I'm sorry, but I have to abruptly leave. Sorry to do this, but it's just something personal here in the house. Nothing, not the Iranians yet.
No missiles. Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
All
sorry,
right.
but thanks.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks, no. Thank you. Thank you.
Michael, your thoughts on threats to Israelis outside of Israel, which is of course something that has been done in the past. There have been attacks. There have been coordinated, serious terrorist attacks. There have been just random people, going on their own and attacking Israelis.
Yeah, look, I have to believe that every Western country and any civilized country has its secret services, and including things like MI6 and our CIA. Although our CIA, of course, doesn't operate in America, inside America. Sure, it doesn't. Our FBI and so on all have their eyes on the usual suspects, as we like to call them. I mean, people with a history of militancy and especially Islamic militancy. There's Nazi groups that are proliferating all over the place as well. We see the progressives and the right wing coming together to have craziness and attack whomever. So I suspect that there's a lot going on watching it, but unfortunately, the nature of human beings and the way we seem to sort of don't understand it. We structure our laws that if you complete a crime, it's considered far worse than if you are attempting a crime. Meaning, and you always hear that that there's a terrorist attack in the planning phase and that the people were intercepted and so on. But one doesn't often hear that the punishments for people that are attempting something but have failed to achieve it are the same as those who've succeeded, which I personally don't understand, because attempted murder and murder are essentially the same in terms of intent and in terms of your danger to society going forward. But I think typical of humans, especially in our righteous current culture, you have to actually do something really bad before you get in trouble. And I do think there have to be, there already are places where Jews and Israelis have been beaten up and accosted and threatened, all the way down to verbally intimidated and so on, prevented from passing through public areas. And the leadership has ignored all this because somehow it's going to go away. And I'll just add on to that we already understand what happens when law enforcement ignores things. We did it with Black Lives Matter and defund the police in America. There is not a single area where defund the police has led to a better situation. All of them have led to double-digit and sometimes triple-digit increases in crime and danger, and usually have also led to many businesses leaving the area. So there is zero evidence that defunding the police is good. Now, people with half a brain understand that there was no evidence before this movement took hold, but there's a group of people that somehow thinks human beings have changed in their behavior over the past several hundred years, and getting rid of the police is a good thing. It's just not. And the more we tolerate this behavior and this hate speech and this justification, and this is what led to Nazi Germany. It was death by 1,000 cuts, finally leading to Auschwitz. But people love to repeat history, and we're seeing it again and again and again.
Yeah, I spoke in my intro about Cori Bush, who was big part of that defund the police movement, and and not coincidentally also a supporter of the Palestinians. Yeah, people who want crime in the West usually want the people who are against the West to prevail. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It's the fact that an attack, if unsuccessful in achieving its goals, is somehow different from if it was the same exact 300 rockets and drones and missiles and whatever Iran fired in April. Had the defense systems not been as good, or for whatever reason not prevented, and hundreds had died that night, then then it would have been clear why Israel needs to respond with a full might of its military. Somehow, the fact that that evening, they did well is somehow means that the Iranian regime, gets to live another day and to plan another day, the ultimate attack on Israel. Somebody here in the chat earlier, and I'm sorry I forgot what it was, and now I can't find the comment, but somebody asked, how does Hezbollah have 150,000 rockets? Well, the reason is what I talked about earlier, the way Israel left Lebanon, and then the way Daniel says it was Best Monster who asked that. So it was the way Israel left Lebanon, and the way Israel, when in 2006 it could no longer deny what it had created by leaving the way it did when Hezbollah attacked. They chose not to end the war decisively. They chose not to win that war. Uh, and that war should have ended Hezbollah. But even now, nobody's talking about uh, Israel keeps saying, if we have to, we'll go to war. But nobody is saying the goal of that war will be the end of Hezbollah. And understandably, considering they said that in the early days about Hamas, and they haven't followed through, and Hezbollah is much stronger, but Israel still has militarily the capabilities both to end Hamas and to end Hezbollah. So it is just the political will that is missing from getting the job done on those two fronts, and of course in Iran. Parting thoughts, Michael?
Yeah, I think we all ought to remember this notion that there's a fundamental difference the way people talk about it between attempted murder and attempted mass murder with 350 plus aerial munitions coming at Israel and being intercepted, and really the absurd comments that it was okay. Listen, folks, this is nothing new. Hamas was sending missiles almost every day to Israel before October 7th. And the only reason that the world was okay with all of it is because we have Iron Dome in Israel. And therefore, very few, not zero, but very few Israelis get killed, and it's okay. A few dead Israelis here and there, a few destroyed houses, a few destroyed farms, a few dead livestock from a missile, a few interrupted school days because kids are screaming and running into a bomb shelter. That's all okay because generally it's not successful. I've always thought this is absurd. Somebody fires a bullet and you're wearing a bulletproof vest, they still try to take you out. What kind of a ridiculousness is it to somehow say that's all right and we can allow them to keep doing what they're doing? Israel has allowed that in both the North and the South. The world has allowed it because Israel is, quote, strong and has these amazing defense. By the way, the cost of these defensive maneuvers is extraordinary. The pain on Israel's economic front is extraordinary. So this is just more of the same hypocrisy that continues day in and day out. And I will say, it's not just Biden's fault. Israel has failed to have good press and stand up for itself. Israel loves to engage, many people do love to engage here in a low level and argue about little things instead of fundamental things, which is to go back and ask, why is it that it's acceptable for a group of militants who are, by the way, getting most of their munitions through Egypt And, every day we're shocked to find more tunnels that go from Egypt into Gaza. Our partner, Israelis, have a peace treaty with Egypt. And we're shocked to find tunnels, and they're firing on us, and Egypt is enabling it. And all of this is not handled well at any level by Israel, and even worse by the Western democracies in the world.
Yeah, the cost, I'm glad you mentioned it. It's tremendous. I mean, just that one night when those rockets, the Iranian rockets were shot down, that was, I don't remember exactly. They published it at the time. It was something like $1 billion just for the defensive weapons that night. Beyond that, there's the ongoing war in Gaza. There's the cost of reservist soldiers who are both need to get paid and also can't do their jobs. So there's a cost to the economy there. The tourism industry is completely dead. Nobody would travel to Israel now. I just saw that EasyJet canceled all their flights until March of next year. Now, anybody who has ever flown EasyJet maybe thinks of that as an advantage to people who want to go to Israel, but but other airlines have done the same. And yeah, and again, had this war ended decisively and quickly, those costs would not be as great as they are on the economy. Israel is going to pay for this, in actual money for a long time. And maybe when you're in government and you have seemingly unlimited funds you can expropriate from your population, it seems like it's doable, but it's not a good idea. So yeah, let's hope. Look, we said, we're waiting to see what Israel does. Or what Iran does, or who acts first. And we're also waiting here on the channel in terms of our content. I'm sure there will be a day in the next few days where we plan a certain topic and we have to change it last minute or not very last minute. But in the meantime, I do recommend that people check out our new Substack. It only has one article now, but it's a great article by Marco on the selfish case for supporting Israel. There will be another one soon. There's a free version, which will include some stuff at some point, and then there's the paid version, which doesn't cost that much, so it's worth it. Michael, where can people find you?
LinkedIn, Kaufman with 2 Fs.
I'm on X, Razi Ginsburg, and yeah, and on Substack soon as well. So with the Ayn Rand Center UK Substack. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll be back here tomorrow with the Daily Objective and the reality show.
Thanks. Bye-bye.